And welcome back to Coast, George Norrie with Chris Aubeck. He is live in Spain as we are talking about his work, Saucers. Chris, here in the United States, they've been conducting hearings on UFOs, which they call UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, what's happening with David Grush and, all this interest that's been going on. I have the feeling that either it's there to distract us from something else that's happening at the moment, or I don't want to say that we're on the verge of some massive discovery, some new revelation, because that seems to happen in every generation. Every few years, there's some new government spokesman or important military guy or politician who comes out with amazing claims about what the government's hiding. It practically never goes anywhere. After a few years, it just fades away. So I don't want to say that I expect this is going to turn into something, but this is a very exciting period. I mean, the best thing that can come from this is to put UFOs back in the public eye and to make reporting them something that doesn't have so much stigma attached to it, because it'll be more normalized than ever. This is something that I noticed in 19th century reports, especially during the Great Airship Wave, 1896 to 1897, because all newspapers were reporting about weird airships being seen in the sky at the time, all over North America. People were more willing to come forward with their own sightings. So at least what's going to come from this is maybe some willingness by the public to come forward with their own testimonies and reports.
Some of the theories are that these might be dimensional, others of planetary. What's your gut say?
The problem with the planetary idea is that it's very difficult to justify why UFOs would have been visiting us for hundreds and hundreds of years, doing the same kind of things, taking soil samples and abducting us and just zooming around the sky. It's very difficult to imagine that they would simply be interplanetary travelers. My friend Jacques Vallée says that there must be something else going on. They could be from another dimension. I think that that's a more likely hypothesis. If I had to choose either between interplanetary and hyperdimensional, I'd go for interdimensional every time, because something much weirder is going on than simple visits.
But we can't be. I don't think we're alone in the universe. Do you?
Absolutely not. No, my gut instinct tells me that our universe is so vast and probably teeming with life. The only problem is whether civilizations generally reach a point without destroying themselves first, at which they can explore the galaxy safely and freely. I hope that humanity reaches that point at some time in the future. But whether we live in a world that's like Star Wars and Star Trek, or whether we're all isolated planets in this massive cosmos, is a very difficult question to answer. I hope that we have brothers out there in space.
They've learned how to bend space and time, I think, Chris.
Well, that would be a good explanation, wouldn't it? I'm sure that our scientists are working on new ways in which we can travel through the universe in the future. I mean, there are lots of theoretical physicists coming up with all kinds of theories. If this is what we can do in the 21st century, mainly without artificial intelligence, how is artificial intelligence going to help us in the future? Maybe that's the key. Maybe in the future, some incredibly advanced version of ChatGPT is going to come up with the solution for hyperspace travel and incredibly fast spaceships, so we can reach Alpha Centauri and so on, maybe within just a couple of generations rather than make it an extremely long and impossible journey. Yeah, I'm banking on artificial intelligence to come up with the solutions we need.
Interesting. Let's start with some calls. We're going to go to your neck of the woods in Barcelona, Spain. Diego is with us. Welcome to the program. Hello, Diego.
Good morning, George. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. And you're on the air with us. Go ahead.
Mr. Aubeck, it's a very interesting, very fascinating take on the phenomenon. And I was just wondering if you had noticed any patterns looking back into the historical records you've examined, and whether the phenomenon, obviously throughout the centuries, has changed. And a speculation on my part was, do you think that the spaceships themselves are the main actor in the phenomenon, and that perhaps the entities are some sort of avatar to interact with them? Or is that too much speculation on my part? And then the last question I wanted to ask you, are you going to give a talk or a conference in Barcelona anytime soon, or another part of Spain?
Well, yeah, they're all really, really nice questions. Let me just answer the last one first. If someone invites me, I'll be happy to go off to Barcelona and give a talk. I haven't given a talk there for several years now, and the last time was at the Magic Conference, I believe, several years ago. Well, when we look back at historical accounts, we find certain patterns, particularly related to shape and behavior. Many of the UFOs seen by our ancestors seem to interact with humanity in different ways. How to interpret that is a completely different question. But the way the craft, the objects, whatever they were, seem to respond to humans and seem to appear during certain events going on Earth, does show that there's some kind of connection between human civilization and these objects. If they were travelers from another dimension or another planet, they seem to be very interested in what's going on this planet. So that would be a very nice explanation for it. I think if they are objects from very distant parts of the universe, it's very unlikely that they are crewed by normal organic beings like ourselves. So I like the idea that they are piloted by avatars of people, or even just huge groups of people in civilizations elsewhere in the galaxy. It would make a lot of sense. I mean, going back to Kenneth Arnold, he believed that the UFOs themselves were the protagonists. He believed that the UFOs themselves were living entities. That's a theory he had from around 1952 onwards. And he wasn't the first to speculate in this way, that possibly we shouldn't be so worried about what's inside a UFO. We should be thinking about whether the UFO itself is the messenger. So these are all really interesting theories, and it would explain a lot. One of the reasons why Arnold was so skeptical of close encounter reports was that he believed that UFOs didn't contain little men, or at least this was an idea of his throughout most of his life. So he was very skeptical about any stories of UFOs landing and the door opening and people coming out, because he thought that these were entities in their own right. So these are all great ideas. I hope that we can answer them someday.
You did a great job with the book Saucers, but why did you key in on Kenneth Arnold so much? And I'm glad you did, but why? What made you do that?
Well, because if you look for the purest, most honest, sincere witness in UFO history, it's probably best to go back to the first one, whoever reached celebrity status, because he wasn't expecting what was happening. He never wanted to make money from his sighting. He was a businessman, but he lost more money than he ever made just by researching his own sighting. So I think that when someone doesn't try to earn a living from the UFO field, yet is very active in it, and I count myself as one of those people because I don't make a living from UFOs. I think that what they have to say is generally more honest, and we should pay more attention to them. And I think that Kenneth Arnold is such an iconic figure. in UFO history. His story should be better known. I'm hoping one day they make a really good movie about it, and I hope they use my book to help them.
That would be great. Did changing the story hurt his credibility?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah. I mean, in Kenneth Arnold's case, actually, he didn't change his story exactly. He did alter some of the details of the craft over time. But, human memory is very fragile. It's very difficult to remember the color of a car that almost ran over our foot yesterday, for example. It's very difficult to remember details of our own lives. If you're confronted by something that's almost unimaginable, something that you've never seen before, that no one's ever seen before, it's very difficult for the brain to register what's going on. So I'm not surprised that he altered his story over time. It doesn't detract from his credibility as a witness, I would say.
Let's go to Bill in Los Angeles. Hello, Bill. Go ahead.
How you doing, George?
Good.
Chris, I'm with you on the historical aspect. I'm an old school journalist, and I've also been a history and language teacher since the 90s. And I just started getting interested in the documentation of flying saucers the last couple of years, particularly the pre-digital age documentation. And I was wondering if you're familiar with a paperback that was published. It's like 1,400 pages long back in 1977 called The People's Almanac 2. Do you know that book?
I don't. I mean, if I look it up in my archive, if it contains some interesting UFO sightings, I probably already have something from what it contained. So what was in it?
Well, on page 599, for example, there's a black and white photo of a disc flying above electrical power lines close to where I live in San Bernardino, California. It was taken by a 15-year-old boy in 1958. And on page 602, there's a Polaroid black and white photo of a hat-shaped disc flying over a rural house in Zanesville, Ohio. I know you mentioned Ohio earlier. And it's just fascinating because these photos are pre-digital, obviously, and they're very difficult to Photoshop or to hoax. And I have a lot more faith in the fact that the people taking them were just average people standing in their yards with no, they're not making money. There's no axe to grind. And there was no internet, as you pointed out, polluting or contaminating the data. So that's why my focus has been on the 50s and 60s, particularly the 50s, including the fact that even President Truman, came in front of a camera in 1950 and acknowledged that the Joint Chiefs were discussing these things. And, that was, I think, as far as disclosure ever got, before it got pushed back. So I'm with you. I'm not looking for any great new disclosure from the government, but I think these old photos by just average people are really helpful in identifying these things.
Yeah, I agree. It's all really interesting stuff. So, I encourage you to join my research group, Magonia Exchange. You can find it on Google, right? Magonia Exchange, and then IO. And then you'll find the group. It's free to join. There are a lot of like-minded people sharing stories. But just to refer back to something you said about Zanesville, I was in Zanesville, Ohio, about 7 years ago now, and I was there to investigate a story from 1873 because there was a tale of it was published as straight fact. Two farmers walking along the road when suddenly they saw this strange black object fly over them. It landed just up in front. It was there was some fire coming out, if I remember correctly. It landed, a door opened, a man in black came out with some kind of lantern. Of course, the two witnesses were quite startled by anything just coming from the sky. But this man in black jumped out of this object and jumped straight into a buggy. And it said it didn't have wheels, it didn't have horses or anything like that, and it disappeared down the road at high speed. So what we're talking about is a really nice close encounter story from Zanesville, Ohio, in 1873. And that's just one of the stories that I write about in Alien Artifacts. I try to visit each of these sites, take photographs there, and go to the local museums and genealogical archives and see if I could find any signs that the witnesses truly existed. And that's what I did. And I had a great time there with my friend Kay Massengill. It's all in Alien Artifacts, Volume 1.
Let's go to Frank in Hollywood, Maryland. Welcome to the show. Hey, Frank.
Chris, what is your sense of invisibility of as it pertains to alien spacecraft? A temporary cloaking of a spacecraft, it requires some kind of power source. If so, they could maintain invisibility all the time. It must be a temporary thing while flying. And could their weapons turrets work while being invisible? And the second thing is, true invisibility, does it mean the breakdown and absence of molecular structure, complete invisibility that wouldn't affect radar?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about whether UFOs have this capacity to become invisible. I think that it's something that if an advanced civilization were visiting the Earth, it would really benefit them. So if that's possible, and I'm sure you're right, I'm sure it is, they would have adopted that kind of technology to very stealthily sail around our skies without us noticing. I mean, there is one interesting argument that says that the reason why these days we don't see so many UFOs in the sky, and we're living in an age of cell phones and video cameras almost everywhere, is that they're forced to use cloaking technology to hide from our cameras. Whereas in the past, until the cell phone age, it wasn't really necessary. I mean, I had a sighting on the 6th of April, 1996, in a small village in Spain called Calarrubias, and I saw it. I didn't have a phone with me that had a camera. Nobody did. So unless you actually sat and drew it, you were very unlikely to be able to take a photograph of it. These days, maybe, I mean, if that's what's happening, if we are being visited by interplanetary or interdimensional craft, maybe they wouldn't have been so brash about it. Maybe they wouldn't have appeared so visibly in front of me. So, yeah, I don't know, but I think that makes a lot of sense. If I was sending a team of scientists to another planet and I had access to invisibility technology, I would definitely use it.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that...
Chris, we're going to come back and take final calls in a moment. Welcome back, Chris Aubeck with us. Chris, you're working on that second part book of the Alien Artifacts, and that comes out when?
Yeah, that'll be in the next 8 weeks, I'd say, probably about 7 weeks away.
Anything dramatic in there?
Well, it's going to be the first time that a lot of these cases have ever been published. UFO crashes. There's a very interesting story about giant meteorites that allegedly came down in Russia. And when they were opened up, people found extraterrestrial mummies or dead bodies inside each one. That's never been published before. And a lot of other stories along those lines. There was an obsession with the idea of finding dead aliens in the 19th century that we find echoes of later on in the 20th century. So, yeah, a lot of stuff that no one's ever seen before. And I always say, if just 1% of this is factual, we're looking at a very interesting time in human history.
Absolutely. Have you been following the crop formation stories?
Yes, I have. In fact, I published a book on this topic in 2018 in Spanish only, and I'm just about to publish a new one, a new version of this in a few weeks' time. I'd like to translate it into English too. And what I've done, I've looked back at stories from 100 years ago or more, and there are some fascinating ones that I'd never seen before about strange circles that appeared even in Canada. People approached the site. They saw very weird beings and very weird objects and phenomena happening in those locations. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think at this point. I believe that most of the cases from the 1980s onwards were fake. I mean, I know a lot. I'm from Southampton. Apart from London, I spent many years in Southampton, which is where the two pensioners came from who made a lot of those crop circles. And we know there that most of the modern ones are fake. But you go back in time, and you can find some really weird things. And I'm going to bring those together for the first ever time and publish those two in the coming weeks. I'm going to be very busy.
Yeah, all you need is one great crop formation, Chris. Just one.
Absolutely. You just need one great UFO sighting, one great UFO landing, one abduction that everyone can watch together, and one great circle of flattened wheat, and there you have it. Then that's the UFO phenomenon done and dusted. It's a shame that it hasn't happened so far.
What did you think of the 1960s case, the Barney and Betty Hill abduction case?
Yeah, well, it's got so many layers. If you look back at the testimony given under hypnosis, I mean, the first thing, I believe it was Barney said that they had these long noses rather than these tiny holes that gray aliens seem to have. There were lots of details in there that don't really correspond with what witnesses said in later years. But being practically the first ever UFO abduction case, we really need to take it seriously. I think that anyone interested in the UFO field really has to know that case very well. I'd love to be able to write about this topic in the future. I just need to get to the original sources in every case, and that's what we all have to do. Not rely on Facebook articles and documentary series. We've got to get back to the roots and find out what really happened.
When I was 21 years old, Chris, I interviewed their psychiatrist, the late Dr. Benjamin Simon. And I specifically asked him, were they telling you the truth, doctor? And he said, whatever they saw, they believed it to be true. I don't know what they saw, but what they think they saw, it was true to them. That's pretty intriguing itself, all by itself.
That's it. I mean, most of the witnesses in all of these cases, these are truths that they will take to the grave. They're their own truth, their own interpretation of what happened to them. I mean, what's certain is that weird things truly do happen in the world. I think that the Hill abduction case has been researched as far as we can take it, and most people believe that they were telling the truth, that something happened to them on that fateful night. What it was is still open to debate, and the fact that it's still open to debate, and this case is the one that people still discuss and get very angry about when they do, shows that there's no smoke without fire.
Let's go back to the calls now. Ted, truck driving in New Mexico. Hey, Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, George, and hi, Chris.
Morning.
You're an authority on the Kenneth Arnold case, so I was hoping you could elaborate on the guy with the boat that happened about the same time there in the Salish Sea with the flag coming off that supported that. And could you also elaborate on, I believe that's origin of Men in Black. People showed up and did a hush-hush thing and ran off with some material. So I'll take your response off air, but I wonder if you know about that stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, Men in Black was a topic that was just becoming very well known during the early flying saucer period, and Kenneth Arnold knew quite a lot about it, of course, because he went to Maury Island and investigated this for Ray Palmer, and that's when the whole Men in Black thing came out. Mm-hmm. But then again, Kenneth Arnold himself had a kind of run-in with a mysterious military man. He said that a stranger had come to their home claiming that his brother worked within the government and delivered a message to the whole Arnold family saying that he should stop discussing his UFO sightings or face serious repercussions in the future. And this was a real threat that Arnold took seriously. Suddenly, mysteriously, some of his conferences were canceled without him ever finding out why. He decided that the threat was so serious, he refused to take plane trips with his family from that point onwards, and withdrew from the whole UFO field for several years. So it's something that whether Men in Black ever really existed as a phenomenon, or whether they still do today, this sense of fear cast a long and ominous shadow over the Arnold family's everyday life. But even so, just a few years later, he went on to start his own UFO society called the WSFS, the World Society of the Flying Saucer. So he was, in a sense, defying this military threat that he felt hung over his family. Although he does say in the propaganda, in the publicity that he made for this society, he says that the society will hold no meetings, no minutes, there'll be no bylaws, no restrictions, no regulations, no records, no presidents, no vice presidents, no secretary, and no nothing. So it's possible that the UFO society that he made didn't publish anything or do anything because he was still afraid of some kind of Men in Black-like threat hanging over his family. And I'm afraid the first question that you asked, I wasn't sure what you were referring to.
Somebody on a boat. Do you deal with many submerged UFO cases?
Yeah, so many of them. In fact, we have a massive catalog of them that we've created in my group, Magonia Exchange. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of unidentified submarine objects. And
that's amazing.
In Alien Artifacts, I believe I mentioned a case in there, and in Wonders in the Sky also. And then in the book that I did with a British researcher called Martin Schoff, we have two chapters devoted to watery UFOs. There's a definite connection there, and that actually reminds me of the medieval worldview, because they believe that what was above was also below and also in the sea, which is why you have these wonderful medieval illustrations of flying cows on the ground, and cows underwater. So in a sense, you have UFOs in the sky, UFOs on the ground, and UFOs in the sea. So it's like an evolution from this medieval worldview, but it's a fascinating field.
West of the Rockies, Aaron's with us in Fountain Valley, California. Hello, Aaron.
Hello, George. Thank you so much for accepting my call.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris, I wanted to say thank you so much for your research. I'm glad to get on with you. My thing is is whether it could be like a bloodline thing, because I had an experience where I was told to go outside, and I go outside and I'm looking up, like kind of waiting, and nothing happened. All of a sudden, something appears out of nowhere, a craft, and it's like, I only get positive messages. So my other thing is about Pumapunku and how, like, their civilizations, they must have known about all that kind of contact. So if they're contacting me because specifically, they appeared and they disappeared out of nowhere. This is here in the San Fernando Valley. It was by Burbank Airport, but it's like UFOs appear over airports. I'm not going to say it's crazy to think what I saw was crazy. In Pumapunku, it's probably an old civilization. They got the flood washed away, but they're telling 5 different types of man, and there's like a 6th one and it's like an alien gray, and it's like very interesting.
Your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, well, I mean, Pumapunku, which is it's this 6th century T-shaped terrace platform, which is in Tiahuanaco in western Bolivia. There's a lot of talk about ancient civilizations and how maybe they interacted with aliens in the distant past. And I always thought that the Earth is so ancient, there's no reason why something couldn't have happened at some point. We're talking about millions and millions of years of unknown history. Maybe something happened. You know, in the book Alien Artifacts, which I published, I have a whole history there of how we came to realize that perhaps aliens visited our planet thousands of years ago. And it's fascinating because this was a theory that was tossed around throughout the 19th century. So what you're saying really corresponds with what authors and philosophers said throughout that period. I'd really recommend that you took a look at the book and had a look at how all of that began, and you'd see how your ideas coincide with what people used to think, our ancestors used to think. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened in the ancient past. Nobody does, but that's a lot of centuries for something to have happened. So one of these days we'll find some real evidence of something very strange from that period.
Do you think Jesus, Chris, was an extraterrestrial?
Well, the interesting thing for me is that in medieval times it was debated whether Jesus Christ had to travel from one planet to another to save mankind or extraterrestrial kind, because when it was the whole Christian dogma in the year 1277 was altered to allow for alien civilizations on planets beyond Earth. And there was a big question. If that's the case, were they all sinners, or did God send his only son to die on every planet independently throughout the galaxy? And then others said, no, that would be too cruel. Let's say that Jesus Christ traveled from planet to planet. And we're talking about Christian philosophers hundreds of years ago having these debates. So at least as far as Christianity is concerned, there's a very long history of debating whether Jesus Christ did travel from planet to planet through the galaxy. I think it's a very entertaining idea. In fact, at the beginning of the 20th century, people were still talking about it, and that was almost 50 years before UFOs ever became popular. So I don't really have an opinion either way at this point. But we should really know about it. And
we really should. Chris, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being on the program. Keep in touch when your other books come out. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.